Hey everyone, welcome in. I'm Captivate, and I'm doing a little bit of a different video here. I ended up winning the second anniversary event at my local game store yesterday, playing Black Yellow Luffy. I'm sure a lot of people want to see him dead after the dominance that he had last set, but I think he's still just as good this format, and I wanted to show you the deck list I was running. So to start off, I was playing the standard amount of 2k counters, so 2 Makino, 4 Flampe, and then 4 Hiyori. I have experimented with 3 Makino, primarily for the Blackbeard matchup, but I kind of decided that I think these 10 are completely fine. I think if there are a lot of Blackbeards, the Makino is really good to just be able to take your life a little bit more aggressively in your opening hand on your first or second turn. You can use her and then take your life. For Kuzan, I have always loved Kuzan in this deck. I think he fits the deck perfectly. You want to go second, and he gives you a really good turn 2 Fordon play, so I really like him for that reason. Particularly against Purple Luffy, if you can play this on 4, it makes them very hesitant to hit you down to 2 life, because if they hit you to 2, you can swing him and then play the Rocket Luffy, and then KO the Luffy Taro that they played on their 7 Dawn turn. So I really like him in the deck. I've experimented with 3 or 4. I think 3 is fine. I just wanted to see him a little bit more today, so I ended up running 4. Kingdom Come, this has generally been included in OP09 decks over in the East, and I kind of just copied what they were doing with it. It's very good against the 10 cost characters that become prevalent in this set, specifically the 10 cost Shanks as well as the 10 cost Blackbeard. I'm not a huge fan of this, and I'm kind of going to be experimenting with other cards I can run instead of it. I have a couple idea of cards that I want to use instead. So right now it's in the deck, and I think it serves its purpose pretty well. With 6 Dawn, it leaves you 4 Dawn open on your 10 Dawn turn, which gives you 2 for your leader ability and then 2 to play a baby. So you can pretty easily do like leader effect, go 7k, and then either leave 1 or 2 life while clearing a 10 cost. So I think for that reason, it's pretty solid, but I'm not super sold on it. 2 Shirahoshi, this is something that I've been experimenting with in OP09, specifically for both Shanks and Purple Luffy. I think those are 2 of the pretty dominant decks right now, so I wanted to be able to KO some of their 8 cost characters. So on play, she can reduce something by 4, and then the Rocket Luffy will KO a 4 or less, so she's pretty good against the 8 cost characters. The Nami, this became popular towards the end of OP08. I think some of the Italian players ended up putting her in the list, and she kind of ended up sticking for specifically Doflamingo, because you're generally going to be lower in hand size, and later in the game you can play her off of Moria. So you can play her off of Moria and then either play Rocket Luffy or Sabo for the other spot, and then she draws you a card, and then you can either KO a 4 cost character or just go double blocker while being 7k and then leaving 1 life or 2 life if you've already done the loop. So going into our searchers here, I'm on 2 Three Brothers Bond and then 4 Garps. I bounce between anywhere from 2 to 4 of these events. Generally, what I would do is I would go 3 Kuzan and 3 events, but for this one, I specifically wanted to test 4 Kuzan. So this is what I ran yesterday. I'm not sure what I think is correct. I think I would never go lower than 2, and I think 4 is a little bit too much just because you can pretty easily pass your Morias, so you don't always want to play it. That's just something to think about. And then finally, we're going to go into the babies, and then the 5 cost characters. I'm just playing 4 of the Luffys, 4 of the Sabos. I do not like Ace in this deck, so for me personally, I'm not a fan of Ace. I've never really been a fan of Ace, so just going 4 of the baby Luffys, 4 of the baby Sabos, and then obviously 4 Punch Luffys, 4 Egghead Luffys, and then 4 Sabos, and then finally we have the 4 Morias here. So yeah, this was the deck list. Like I said, I think I might end up switching this for an event, and then I'm still thinking about the Kingdom Comes. I'm not entirely sold on it. I might change this to an Ice Age or something else that I have that I'm thinking about that I need to test, but this is the deck list. As far as matchups, in my round 1, I ended up playing Enel, and that was a really close game. I think Enel is pretty free for this deck. But he ended up in his last turn. I had 6 swings, and then he ended up getting 2 0 cost events. and then he ended up being one card away from a beige. So if that last card was a beige, then he would have ended up winning that game, but we ended up getting that game. The second game, we played a Shanks, which I think in all of my testing, this deck is really favored into Shanks so far. I'll put a guide out on how to play against it because I think you need to play against it a little bit differerently, but so far I really haven't been struggling with that deck, and I think this deck specifically is really good into Shanks. He's almost like another version of the ST13 Black Luffy, where he's going to try and KO your board, but the only thing that he can really do is if he sees a lot of Beckmans, he can trash your Sabos, but that really isn't too much of an issue. The one thing to make note of is you just you have to make sure that you keep your one life so that you can play around the Roger if they play it. After the Shanks, I ended up getting pretty lucky and I got paired into the Lucci, the only undefeated Lucci at the time. So I played into a Lucci. That matchup was honestly really hard. I never saw a Moria throughout the whole game and I only saw one Sabo, so I kept having to like play over this Sabo and then reuse it. And I think the only reason I ended up winning that game was because it was against Lucci, and this deck is so favored into that, but that matchup was pretty hard. And then after the Lucci, we ended up playing another Shanks, which again, I think this deck is pretty favored into Shanks, and that went pretty well, and that was the final round, so I ended up winning after that. And we ended up getting the promo for the Luffy, which I will definitely be using going forward. This is a pretty high contender for me to take to Nationals. I just need to figure out the ratios that I want to take and do some more testing into some of the decks that I think it can struggle into. But yeah, I'm really confident in this leader right now. I think he's still in a pretty good spot in this metagame. And then in addition to getting the leader in our packs, I unfortunately didn't record opening them, but we ended up pulling a manga Shanks, so that was super awesome, and my wife was really excited to put this into her deck, so really, really happy about that. And thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile.